Hello. In this video, we're going to take a few minutes, and we're going to go over something that is important to chemistry and physics and advanced science, and that is how to write a pre-lab. So in all of the science courses that I teach, you're going to be writing pre-labs, you're going to be writing formal labs. So what I'm going to do today is go over the formatting for a pre-lab. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There we go, start the share. And we're going to jump right into the formatting for a pre-lab. A pre-lab is the document that you're going to prepare before you do a lab, hence the name pre-lab. And I have a very specific format that I'm going to want you to use in your pre-lab. So let's go ahead. I've got a presentation here that I'm going to walk through to help you understand that. So first of all, on the top of your screen, on the top of your page, you're going to have a title. This is the heading part of the pre-lab. So at the top left-hand corner in the heading area, right, of your document, you're going to have your name. You're going to use a semicolon, and you're going to list your lab partners. Now, obviously, you may or may not know who your lab partners are ahead of time. Usually you do, and so you can type your name and then their names. If you don't, you can just leave a blank and then write those in when you get there. Below that, you're going to put the date, and below that, you're going to put the experiment number and the title. You can see that here. So let me see if I can move this out of the way here. So we've got this is the example. Trevor Melton is writing the lab report. Will Dean and Nathan Stickles are his lab partners. Its date is September 21st, 2015. Here's the experiment 3.1, the conservation of mass. So that's what the title would look like, the heading would look like at the top of your page, your pre-lab. Now, in a pre-lab, there are 5 sections that I expect you to have in every single pre-lab. Those sections are a purpose statement, a materials section, a procedure section, data and observations, and then notes. You should bold each heading, each one of these 5 sections. One important feature of every lab that you write, there are no personal pronouns, whether it's a pre-lab or a formal lab. What's a personal pronoun? That's I, me, we, you, he, she, us. The only pronoun you will be using in your labs, pre-lab or formal labs, is it. Okay, it is your friend. The other pronouns you will not be using. Okay, so those are the 5 sections. I'm going to now step through each of the 5 sections. Okay, let's look at the first section. The first section is the purpose statement. In the purpose section, you're going to use 1 or 2 sentences to describe the objective or the reason for completing the lab. You're always going to write your purpose statement in a complete sentence or sentences. I want to also make it very clear that in any science course, we are not proving things. So you're not going to prove anything as an objective. A better word to use is that you're affirming something, you're going to verify something, or you're going to demonstrate something. So in an actual pre-lab, what would that look like? Let's go the next way. Here we go. We're back to our sample pre-lab with all the other information I had previously, and we've added in a purpose statement. For experiment 1, which is called the conservation of mass, the purpose is to verify experimentally the law of mass conservation. So that's what a purpose statement would look like. Quite simple, easy to do. Let's jump into the next section, which is the materials section and any safety precautions. So in your materials sections, you're going to list all materials that are needed to complete the lab. You're going to include them in a list format. Okay, you can bullet them, you don't have to, but don't write them out in a paragraph kind of formatting, because I want you to be able to quickly look at your pre-lab when you get to either my house or the classroom and verify that you have everything you need. So you're going to list them line, one item per line. And then also in this section, if there are any specific safety precautions related to the materials, you're going to write that in this step. So what would that look like? Here's our sample lab. We've got all the things we had before, and now we've got a materials list. And you can see I've got a beaker, a wash glass, a teaspoon, lye, white vinegar. And also you can see that I have written a safety precaution in. Lye is caustic, it must be handled with caution. Use gloves, use water to wash it down the drain when you're done. So that's what a materials section in a pre-lab would look like. Let's go on to our next section, which is the procedure section. Now in the procedure, This is a detailed step-by-step explanation of every part of the lab. What I don't want you to do is to take, if you're a touch typist, to basically have the lab there or the text there next to you and just touch type every single word that's listed in the procedure of the lab itself. And why do I not want you to do that? Because I want you to be prepared to do the lab. So you need to read through the lab, understand each and every step, and then step by step, write those out in your own words, so that when you get to the classroom or to my home, you know what you're doing. There will be multiple experiments going on at the same time, and I am not able to make sure that you know what to do. This is how you prepare yourself to be ready to perform the lab. You're going to number all the steps. Again, no personal pronouns, and your steps need to be detailed enough to allow you to reproduce the lab. So you know exactly what you're doing simply by reading your steps. And what would that look like in an actual lab? Here you go. Here's the procedure down here. Measure the mass of the empty beaker. Once that data is recorded, add a qualitative measurement of 60 milliliters of vinegar to the beaker. Just like that. Step by step, write out what you're doing. It needs to be that level of detail. Okay, that's your procedure section. As you can see in here, there are no personal pronouns listed. It doesn't say you record the mass, it just says record the mass, right? So that's how you're going to list the procedure step by step. The next section is the data and observation. So this is really an important section. You will always have either a data section where you're going to record measurable data, or an observation section, or both. Okay, and after you read the lab, you should have a sense of what you need. If you need to measure actual data, I don't want you to just write data section and then leave a blank. What you need to do is determine ahead of time all of the pieces of information that you need to measure. The reason for that is if you don't, what will happen is you'll do the lab and you'll forget to record something, and then you won't be able to complete your analysis of it. So when you read through the lab, it will tell you exactly what to record. By looking through the lab steps, you'll be able to know what to write in your data section, in your data table. If you have measurable data, some experiments don't. It's always good to have an observation like area in your pre-lab, and that way if there are other things that you notice as you perform the lab, you have a space where you can jot those things down. But just know that you must have either a data section or an observation section, or both. If you turn in a lab that says data and then no data, or something like that, no data to record, you will be marked off significantly, because while you may not have data, you must have observations then. So include all the measurements. If you make a mistake in writing down data, or you recognize a measurement is clearly off, you never erase in a lab. What you do is simply line through it and make another measurement that is more accurate. Okay, and then also the observations is going to allow you to write down anything you see, anything you feel, hear. If you touch it and it's warm or cold, those kinds of things, that would all go in your observations section. But just remember, your pre-lab has got to have either data or observations, or both. What would that look like in an actual pre-lab? It would look like this. Now, I'm going to show you this page here. This is, if you notice down here, I have an arrow pointing to page 1. If your pre-lab goes on to 2 sheets of paper, make sure that you number the pages. Okay, so there's nothing new on this sheet. Here we go. Here's our data. Also, if you notice on this second sheet, I have included the title again. I've included the student's name and the date. You don't have to include your lab partners on subsequent pages, but I do want the title on the second page, as well as the student's name. So should anything get separated, we know whose it is. So here is a great data table. In this particular experiment, all you're doing is measuring the mass before a chemical reaction and a mass after a chemical reaction. This information here would have been set up in the pre-lab ahead of time. These information written here in blue is the information that the student would record during the experiment. So for this particular experiment, they measure 2 masses. one to be 155.7 grams, another to be 155.6 grams, right? That's information that would have been recorded and then written into the table during the experiment. Some observations: when the lye was poured into the beaker, the solution changed from pink to yellow. The solution in the beaker got warm as the chemical reaction took place, and there were particles in the bottom of the solution that did not dissolve. Okay, again, this is all information written during the lab itself. When you're creating the pre-lab, you would just leave blank spaces for those things, okay? All right, and then finally, our next section is the notes section. Now, this may feel like, why do you have a notes section? The purpose of this section is to allow there to be space should you need to make any notes for yourself. What kinds of notes would you make? Well, if you make an error in your procedural section, then you would want to jot that down in the notes section. If your actual procedure varies from the textbook procedure, you would want to write that down because you will need to address that in your formal lab. If you make a mistake procedurally, you would want to write that down. If you have results that seem uncertain or incorrect, you would want to make a note of that. So you just want to have a space where you can make notes of things to basically prepare you to write the formal lab with the greatest accuracy. You might also want to do some calculations to prepare for the analysis, and you could certainly do that in your notes section. So those are you're just going to write a notes section, leave a space where you can write some notes down. And again, what would that look like? Again, we're back to here's the first page of the pre-lab. Here's the second page, all the older information. The notes section, it would just be notes and a blank. And then we might write something like this: the 1/10 of a gram difference in the recorded masses could have been due to significant to error or significant figures in the digital readout of the mass scale. So just again, that's just an example of what a note might look like in a pre-lab. So those are the 5 sections that you will need to create in every single pre-lab that you prepare. And a few final notes: each pre-lab is going to be worth 10 points. You'll receive 2 points for each of the following correctly formatted and prepared sections. Again, your purpose section, your materials and safety precautions, your procedure section, your data table, and your notes. Pre-labs can be either handwritten in ink or typed. Your formal lab will have to be typed, but your pre-lab can either be handwritten or typed, but it must be handwritten in ink. Okay, it's a permanent thing. We're not going to be erasing the steps and things, anything like that. So your pre-lab would need to be handwritten in ink. If you take the time to type it up, it will save you some time and energy once you get to the formal lab, and I'll explain that in the video about the formal lab. You need to have your pre-lab with you at the beginning of lab to receive full credit for it. If you try and write it up during class time or while we're doing the lab, you will not receive full credit. And there is always a sample pre-lab in the general info folder in the materials section of Schoology. So if you're not sure what the pre-lab should look like, there's always an example there that you can go to. You can print that out and have it with you so that every time you do a pre-lab, you know exactly what needs to be in there. The main purpose of the pre-lab is to help you be successfully prepared to conduct the experiment. And then after the lab, you will prepare a formal lab report, and I'll have another video that walks through the sections for the formal lab because they are not the same as the pre-lab. So that is what I am looking for each and every time that you write a pre-lab for me. I hope that this is helpful and gives you a little bit of insight into what that's supposed to look like. Obviously, if you have questions on any of this, you're welcome to reach out to me and I'm happy to clarify anything for you. But that is the nuts and bolts of writing pre-lab. Pretty straightforward, right? Okay, thanks so much for watching.